Hi, this is Cody Veerkamp from the Strand Theatre again. I'm going to do another one of these technical vlogs. First thing up on today's docket is going to work on the projection system a little bit around here. So down here is our, at least, fairly new rack we got here that I put in probably a couple months ago at this point. And down at the bottom here is where a lot of our projection stuff takes place. So we got Blu-ray player, this thing here that's labeled as a scaler, and then a couple of different HDMI switches. So I'm going to work on, first of all, putting in a drawer on these last two rack units down here at the bottom where we just have stuff stuffed right now. And the reason I'm putting it in a drawer is to be able to keep that stuff in, but honestly, kind of the more important reason I'm actually putting in a drawer there so I can use the front of it to make some labels for our projection system. And as I go through making those labels and everything, I'll explain a little bit more about how this projection system works. So let's get started on that. Okay, so got that drawer installed now. See there? And so here's, I'm kind of working on label wise here on my laptop. This is just kind of a rough draft that I started at the house. Now I just kind of need to get some measurements and make sure that everything's going to line up where I want it to be. So for right now, we'll just look at this, and I'll do a little bit explaining about how this works. I will move back and forth a little bit, actually. So this first device here is in some ways an HDMI switch, but more accurately what it's called is an HDMI matrix. And basically what this device what the matrix means is the fact that it's a multiple output device. So it has 4 inputs that can be switched in between, but then it also has 2 outputs that can be independent of each other. So we can have one input going to one output and a completely different input going to a different output. It's not exactly something we needed, but this is probably about the 3rd or 4th iteration of this setup I did after doing a bunch of testing at my house, and this seemed to work the best, so this is kind of what I stuck with. So basically, the labels right now are kind of up in this gap, and if you tilt your head just right, sometimes you can see them, but it's not exactly easy. So the idea of putting in a drawer here is now I get this nice big flat space out in front that I can put a big label on and explain what all this does. So on this HDMI matrix, first thing you can see is there's an out A and an out B. Those are basically the 2 different outputs, and then each 1 through 4 in each of those outputs are the 4 inputs. As you can see, are labeled up here. We've got a laptop on 1, NC on 2, which just means no connection. 3 is Blu-ray, and 4 is stage. So I go ahead and turn this on here. Give it a second to power up. Sorry if those LEDs create too much of a glare, but here we go, maybe if I do it. So basically right now you can see both outputs are selected on 4, which is the stage. If I wanted to, on one of these, I could change it to something else completely. So now A would be outputting the Blu-ray, and 4 would be outputting the stage input, which the stage input is just a jack we have up on stage for presentations up there. So how we treat our 2 different outputs is A is what I call program, and B is what I call preview. A, or the program feed, is what goes up to our projector. And B is the preview feed, which goes over to this little bitty preview monitor off to the side of the soundboard. And then it also goes to our streaming feed, which there's a reason for that I'll explain here in a second, why I have the streaming feed take from the preview instead of the program. And then the next thing on here, which should always be on A in our setup. Basically, it's just letting us select, hey, do the audio that's getting output of this device, because that's how our soundboard gets the audio straight out of this matrix. Where it comes in over here on the ones that are labeled PROJ projector. It's just saying which output do we want the audio to come from, and we pretty much always would want it to come from A, which is our program feed. And then these next two options down here are things that in our use case doesn't really matter. Now here we have a second HDMI switch. And what this one does is it selects how the output going to the projector will be handled. So basically the output A, or program output over here, goes into this device, and kind of hard to see, but that yellow label there says full screen. Right now it defaults to no connect on input 1 because for whatever reason they decided on this HDMI switch input 1 should be the one on the front, so it's not exactly easiest cable management wise, so I just skipped that one. So normally it should be on 2 in full screen. So basically what that means is that it's going to take up our entire bigger roll down screen. And this is like when we would do movies and that kind of thing. And then our other option though is this other orange label that says scalar. And we put it on that one. It, instead of just going straight from our matrix and up to the projector, it first goes through this device up here that's labeled scalar. And this device can do a lot more than what we're doing with it. However, for what we're doing with it, it's perfect. Because you can see it has multiple inputs, but unfortunately we can't really use that as an input switch, because on this particular device, let's see here, I think the first 3 inputs are composite video, the 4th one is S video, and then I think there's a component video, which is still the RCA connections, but it's like the red, green, and blue RCA connections. A little bit better, but still not great. And then 6 and 7, I think, are VGA, and 8 is DVI. So out of all those 8 inputs, only one of them is a digital connection. It's not even HDMI, it's DVI, which is very similar, but not the same regardless. So it wouldn't really work good for us as a switcher. It's definitely from an earlier generation of components, but the cool thing we can do with this is, because it doesn't really necessarily have a button that says it, but okay, size, yeah. So size is what we're using on this thing. And basically what this device will do is it will take in the full screen HDMI feed via an adapter, and then shrink it down to, I'm not sure if you've ever been to one of our events where we use our small screen or our floating screen. It's basically a smaller screen that just kind of hangs above the stage, and we've been using it a lot for some of our lectures, and also even for some of our bands, putting different things up on that screen. Basically lets us have a screen that we can use when other things are going on the stage. And basically what it does is it takes that HDMI picture and shrinks it down inside of that regular 1080p resolution, and just basically puts big black boxes around it. If you've ever seen a letterboxed image, it's the same kind of concept, except it's just shrinking it down so that the only part of the signal that has actual picture on it is the exact spot that we need to hit our small screen using our exact same projector. Now, some of you may still be a little scratching your head here, but it's something that I'm not going to be able to go into too much more detail because it's just kind of hard to explain. But it's definitely something that is cool that lets our system do. And I guess I did say that I would tell you why our streaming feed goes off of the preview instead of the program. So one of the things that we can do is when we do streaming for like a lecture or something, we have the ability to send whatever is going through our projection system directly to our streaming rig that's right up here back behind the board right at the moment. That lets us have to be able to show the presentation without having to point a camera at it. However, in most of those lectures, we run it through the scaler here. And the problem with that is if we tried sending the program feed to our streaming rig, we would get that scaled image on our streaming setup. And there's no reason for it to be scaled. So easy way to do that, send it the preview feed instead of the program feed. Okay, labeling done. Didn't turn out too bad. Fortunately, the program I was using to try and create these labels, the scaling in the program didn't exactly translate exactly the scaling on the paper, so it took a few tries, but in the end I think I got it good enough. So while we're looking at this rack, we'll go over some of the quick things we have in there. We've got this power distribution thing at the front. You can see I covered the voltmeter with tape because this voltmeter never worked right. This is in the first place this particular rack mount power strip has been installed, and power outlet parts of it work just fine. It's even got little pull-out lights, but that voltmeter just isn't accurate, so I covered it with tape so people don't freak out. Next thing down, we've got 3 Shure microphone receivers, and these are the receivers for our handheld mics, which we are now stored down in this drawer. Got some SM58 wireless microphones. Got 2 actual handhelds, and then this third one we have a body pack for. I think we have a body pack for at least one of these other ones too. Body pack meaning this also kind of referred to a lot of times as like a lavalier mic, except our body packs, the microphone actually is on a headset, not on a clip-on, where lavaliers are usually just like a clip-on. But regardless, it's some kind of handheld wireless mic. Next thing down here is we got our main CD player. That's a single deck, no disc in it right now. Next thing down we have is a dual deck CD player. Left one labeled do not use right now, mainly because the ejecting mechanism isn't working right. Not sure exactly what's wrong with it, but it's something that we've got enough CD decks without it, so for right now we just are not using it. But as you can see, there's really not any controls for it. That actually is in a separate unit, which we just mounted up over here above the board. So these are the controls for both of those 2 decks, and the decks themselves are just located over here. And then below that is where we start getting into projection stuff I went over earlier. And then the only other thing is we've got a couple other handhelds that are just kind of spare / backup that we have on this little shelf off to the side. Normally you don't have to use them, but sometimes we need more than just the 2 handhelds, so we've got those two there. Okay, now I'm back down here in the dressing room. And I'm going to attempt to at least try and make some progress with these speakers. These are regular 70-volt speakers. As you can probably tell, they're ones that we were able to scavenge from another building that got torn down. Those are going to go up in some of these ceiling tile spaces here. I think in the end we're going to try and put 3 of these down here. And then we'll figure out somewhere where we're going to want to run all the speaker cables to and have a volume control. I'm not going to finish this today by any means, but maybe we can at least get to the point where we can get them filled in here. And then I might also got some, let's see, we got some Cat 5 cable here. I need to put an end on that. There's going to be an access point that gets put in down here. So basically what I'm doing here is I took this metal piece that supports the back side of the speaker, so because these foam tiles can't usually hold the weight of a speaker by themselves. Use that to trace a hole. Went around with just my knife, cut through that foam. Now we're going to take this little bowl part that is on the back of the speaker, kind of encloses it, keeps and kind of directs the sound outward. Put this in from the bottom side like that. And then take our little back brace, put on the back side like this. And then we're going to go in from the front side with these little screws here and get them to go through the foam tile, which being foam tile should be hard to just, we don't really have to drill or anything like that, just push it through. And it's going to go in these kind of little tapped holes here. Those, see, those aren't perfectly round, those are actually somewhat threaded. So we're going to push the screws through that. See this? Yeah, I think this goes like that. You can see it's probably the dirty side that was up. Makes a little bit more sense, especially with those threads going outwards like that, away from where the screw is going to be going in. Okay, first tile installed. You can see I got 3 wires running to this middle speaker. Basically, one of those is going to be coming from the volume control, and the other 2 are going to one there, one here for the other 2 speakers. So something we need to, or I feel I should mention when it comes to this kind of speaker system, is it's called 70 volt. Basically what that means is that each of these little speakers have a transformer on them. And essentially the amplifiers have the same kind of thing, except it's a lot bigger, obviously, because it needs to do the whole amp. But you can see there's a bunch of different little wires coming off of this transformer. And hopefully we'll have a label here somewhere. Okay. So this is the label I'm going to be referring to, but I kind of need to get it where I can read it. But basically, black is your common, which will mean like your negative in typical systems. And then you have 2 different sides that are 0.5, 1, 2, and 4. And okay, here we go. So yeah, everything on this side is for a 25 volt system. Everything on this side is for a 70.7, or essentially 70 volt system. So 70 is what we're going to be doing. And so that means if we make a connection with the black on negative and then the white on positive, it'll run at 0.5 watt. And then yellow 1 watt, blue 2 watts, and 4 with the brown wire. So looks like right now the wire that's undone is the violet, which means that wherever this speaker was before, it must have ran on 25 volt, probably at 2 watt. So first of all, we're going to need to do a 70 volt wire one way or the other. So basically the amp that's going to be feeding these speakers down here is up in the projection booth. If you ever see me, or I think early in this video even, you'll see footage of the amps up there, if quickly. A bunch of a big rack of silver-faced amplifiers. And the one that's going to be running the area back here will be at least 30 watt, potentially 60, depending on which amplifier I want to use. Probably a 30. So that means I've got a 30 watt budget for these speakers back here. And it's something that you can't go over that, and even in best practices you want to get a certain degree below your amplifier maximum, but you can go underneath it. So even if I set all 3 of these to 4 watts, that'd be 12 watts, which would be less than the 30, so I'd be good. But I'm sure probably some of you are probably wondering, well, what's the point of having all these transformers and all these different taps and everything like that? Why can't you just run the speakers directly to amplifier? And in a lot of cases, you would normally do that. Like all of our house speakers and everything like that, speakers are connected directly to the amplifier circuitry. There's no transformers are doing anything with it. Well, the advantage to using a 70 volt system like this is essentially something called impedance. Now, disclaimer here, I am by no means an expert when it comes to some of this stuff, and if I am wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. But generally speaking, when you go talk about impedance and 70 volt systems and this kind of thing, when you don't use a 70 volt system and just plug speakers directly to amplifiers, the actual voltage that is running on those speaker wires is quite low, actually. That's why you can part of the reason why you can benefit from having thick cables is because that voltage is so low. Now, again, don't quote me on this, but I think it's even maybe just a couple of volts on most of the times running speakers. But the thing that makes the difference when that voltage is so low is that it makes it something where that impedance has to be watched real carefully. And impedance is measured in ohms or resistance. Most speakers will be 8, 6, maybe 4. Sometimes if you're talking about subwoofers, especially I've seen in like car systems and everything, you might be talking a couple ohms. But it's something that if you try and connect 2 speakers together, and it's something, their resistance doesn't stay the same. So say you have 2 8 ohm speakers and you hook them together on the same lead from the amplifier. Well, that drops that total impedance, I believe, down to 4. I think it's basically cut in half. Again, don't quote me on this, but it's something where it drops that resistance regardless. So if you start hooking more and more speakers together, that resistance keeps going down low and lower, and that can damage your amplifier. However, when you bump the voltage up to 70 volts like this, the impedance or resistance is still there, but at least in most cases, it's changed enough so that adding on additional speakers is negligible to the performance. So, long story short, 70 volt system, what does it do for us? Well, it lets you hook up a bunch of speakers off of one single amplifier line. Down here I'm going to do 3. Up in the lobby I've got 4, but that's small compared to what some systems can do. I mean, it's something you could be talking in a store. The speakers that you see in the ceiling, those are usually 70 volt. And it's something you could be talking 50, 60 speakers easy in a large enough store that could potentially run off of 1 amp. And that's just because that's a 70 volt system, and it lets you put that many more speakers on a single line. So that was kind of a little bit of a long-winded explanation. And again, not a professional one, but kind of should get the gist of how this kind of thing works. For everywhere that I've put in 70 volt speakers here before, or so far, I've used the 4-watt tap, which means I would be using the black wire, and I believe this should be the brown wire. Yeah, 4-watt brown BR. I might be a little excessive for a tight space like this, but it's something that's easy enough to change if I need to. But it's also something that if I absolutely have to, like I said, there's going to be a volume control down here, but also these speakers are probably going to be the only thing on this amp, at least for right now, and the foreseeable future. So if I have to, I can always turn down the amp. And I'm not sure how strong of the input audio will be into our 70 volt system, and also, at least for the time being, I'm going to start at 4 watts. I'm sure somebody has more experience with 70 volt speaker system setup might be saying, oh, that's way too much power. It seems to be working okay in the lobby, and until I have a reason to change it, that's what I'm going to stick with. So basically I'm going to run each of those 3 wires to black for the common, and then the red wire on my speaker wire will go to the brown. Use some of these wire nuts I have over here to wire nut that all up, and then we'll move on to hopefully getting these other 2 speakers installed. See how far I get. Okay, and there's our first finished speaker. What it looks like from underneath and from above. Now I just got to try and get that done 2 more times, and at least the speakers will be done. Okay, been working for a bit now. I have 1 speaker, 2 speaker, 3 speaker, all wired up at least down here to this volume control. As you can see here, it's not hooked up yet, so because I still have to run the big run all the way upstairs to the projection booth. And that's probably something that I'm gonna get some help doing because of the distance I have to run. And since I'm running that massive distance, more likely I'll probably run 2, if not 3 cables all that way, because if you're running a long distance like that, you always run more than you need. But today is Thursday, and tomorrow we have Rusty Ship coming in, which is a band live performance. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of what we have to do to prepare for some of these events tech-wise. Usually we'll get some kind of stage plot or generalized drawing of what we need or what the band is going to need. I got it printed out here. Now this one's got a little bit that I've drawn on myself and some stuff I've added, like all these colored boxes and any of these numberings, and then this table on the side is something I added in after I got the image. Base you can see here, you got the stage facing the audience at the top there, then you got all the different performers, what it is that they're going to be doing, like guitar, vocals, drums, and then what kind of mics we need. So basically for this one, we got 3 people across the front, each with a vocal mic, and then 2 guitars and a bass. And then when it says it needs amp mic, that means we're gonna have to use a microphone to amp microphone their guitar amp cabinet. And some of you might wonder, why do we mic a speaker when we can just have them plugged directly in or get some kind of more direct feed? Well, a lot of guitars are very particular about how they sound, and a lot of that can come from what kind of amp they have. So to get that sound that they really like, a lot of times it's better to just go ahead and mic the guitar amp cabinet, and it gives them a lot more of the sound that they're looking for. And with the drum mics, I'm not sure, it depends on how we end up doing this show, how much we actually mic up. Our theater is a very lively theater, meaning that a lot of the sound on stage is meant to be directed out towards the audience. So a lot of times we don't necessarily need to have each individual instrument on the drum set mic'd. I've got channels laid out for it, but a lot of times what we'll do is just mic the kick drum so we can get that nice bass kick from that drum. And then we also do an overhead mic, which is just a mic that goes up and over everything and is a little bit more of a sensitive mic that can pick up a lot of those kinds of things. A lot of times with an overhead, its main purpose is to catch like the cymbals and that kind of thing. But for us, a lot of times it even does fine picking up the snare and the toms and everything. So like I said, that's going to probably be a decision that's made tomorrow, but there's still a lot I can do here ahead of time before we do this event. And a lot of times I would do this the morning of, but since this is an event taking place on a Friday, and I've got a day job during the day on a Friday, so I'm gonna do this on a Thursday night to try and get a little bit ahead of the game. So I'm just standing here in front of the stage, looking at that for right now. One of these boxes here on the floor on the front of the stage is where we have our front snake, where we run connections into the back into Circuit City, which you might have seen in one of my other videos, but we'll probably end up back there at some point. And then this green cable here is one of our monitor amp cables. If we go here to the other side, we've got power, and then the other monitor amp feed for up here, and in various places in the stage, which you can't exactly see right now because we have 2 different kinds of covers. We've got these covers that have holes in them, and then we've got just solid covers. And for the last event that we did in here, which I would believe would have been the pageant, it was better to not have those, because especially when you talk about high heels and holes that are that big, it may not be a good thing to have those. So we'll probably swap those out to our other covers too. So on this here, I added in numbers for what channels I want this to go on our board, and then whether they're black or gray indicates whether I'm planning on doing front or rear snake. And I just have what snake port I'm planning on having them go into, and then what channel on the board I'm planning on having that correspond to. These numbers over here right now are just board channel, so I'll have to look at that to make sure I keep straight what channels in the snake I want them in. So that's what you'll see me be doing here now. Okay, now basically got everything done that I can, pre-wired. If we here start on the stage left, see we got one position for, I believe it was the lead guitarist. Got a couple monitors there. A couple monitors here for the lead vocalist. I think also does guitar. So you can see down here for right now, I've got these kind of flat mics. These are mics, let's see, they're Sennheiser E609s. They're basically designed to amp cabinets with. So we've got a couple of those that we use. They work pretty well. And then on the vocalist, we've got your standard classic Shure SM58. Pretty much anyone in the sound industry kind of knows those as the not exactly cheap, but not exactly expensive either. Just workhorse of a vocal mic. And then down here, another vocal mic for, I believe it's the bass guitarist. Only got one monitor down here because we only have 6 total, and we needed them in 4 different spots. So the bigger, I guess, of our monitors we're putting on the bass and the drumist, or the drummer, and only doing the one. And then basically that pair on the end, this pair here, and then the one on the bass and the drummer, each pair of those operate as a single mix essentially from our board. What that means basically is that I can control independently what each microphone on the stage, essentially how much of that particular mic goes into each pair of monitors. So if the vocalist is singing here and says, hey, I need to hear more guitar, lead guitar in these monitors, I can turn that one channel up, but it has to be in both of these. And these where it's just 2 monitors on one person, not a big deal, but unfortunately the bassist and the drummer, they get the same mix. Down here I got a little mic on a little stand. I'm not sure if that's the stand I'm going to use, but that's what I got to put in for right now. This is a SM57, also kind of a cousin of the SM58. Very commonly used for miking instruments of some kind. Like I said, we only have 2 of the Sennheiser flat ones but this is also a very good mic to mic instruments with. Again, I'm no professional when it comes to a lot of this stuff, but essentially what the difference between like this mic here and this vocalist mic up here that we're using, they're both by a brand called Shure. One's a SM57, one's a SM58. They're a very similar kind of microphone. Main differences with the SM58, it's more of a, I guess you could say, omnidirectional mic, in that it doesn't just pick up sound from right in front of it. It's best to speak into the front center of it, don't get me wrong, but it's something that it'll pick up sound from the sides of it and that kind of thing a little bit more. Whereas this one here, the SM57, is much more directional, and it's designed to pick up sound from just directly in front of it. That might be a little bit of a kind of layman's definition of what the difference between those two are, but that's the best way I know how to explain it. And over here on the drums, I talked about how I'm not sure yet how much mics I'm going to use, but at the very least I know I'm going to use this overhead. It's a little bitty mic, but this mic is designed to be a lot more sensitive, so it can be way up in the air like that and pick up a lot more of the sound that's below it, which that's a double-edged sword in some ways, because it lets you pick up a lot of audio, that's for sure, but it's something that you don't want that overhead mic to run into, say, or the signal from that mic rather, to be fed back through to, say, this monitor, because what happens then is the microphone starts picking up itself coming out of a speaker, and that will lead to what's called as feedback. If you ever hear the loud reverb or kind of ringing sound coming from a PA system and think, what the hell is that? It's basically sound getting looped, going in the microphone, coming back out of speaker, back into the microphone, back out of the speaker, and it creates that phenomenon called feedback. So with this microphone here, it definitely won't be sent into this monitor. And then down here we have a kick drum mic. Usually I'll put on a little stand like this, and then most kick drums will have a hole in the front of the drum, and just stick that mic right in the front side of the hole. I've also done it before where I literally lay the microphone inside of the drum, like right up next to where the pedal is, and that works well as that works too as well. But that requires actually usually put like a towel or pillow inside the bass and the kick drum in those cases. And while that also works really well, it's a lot of times it's just easier to go ahead and put it on a little stand like this, put it in front of the port on the front of the bass drum. And these two mics are running back to what we call our back snake, which is a little 8-channel or 8 XLR channels, I guess I should say. And then it's also got 4 of these 1/4-inch jacks. Usually what you'll call that means that it'll be 8 sends and 4 returns. Basically, because the XLR jacks are designed to send signal to the board, and 1/4-inch jacks like this, typically at least, are designed to return sound from the board. And in this back snake and in the front snake technically too, we never use the returns, but that's basically what they're there for. I got the front snake covered up right now, but you saw it earlier. That's the kind of the cover we use to hide that part of it. And then both of those snakes, it's been in the last video, but I'll show you again in case you're new. And if you are new, be sure I got another video up on YouTube you can check out. Here's our master snake that comes back from the board, and we basically use it to patch. So this bigger one here comes from the front snake, and then the smaller one here comes from the back snake. And then basically we just patch stuff how we want it to come. And you can see in this back snake we actually do use the returns, because those returns are what go down and feed signal to our amplifiers back here that runs the speakers. So on this one, we do actually use the returns. In case you're wondering why there's 2 jacks plugged into this one, that has to do with those monitor feeds. With the monitor feeds, the two pairs up front, the kind of the smaller ones, it's 2 of those each are run by 1 channel in the amplifier. So on these amplifiers, you typically have 2 channels, usually meant for like left and right. But in our case of our monitor amp, let's see here, which one's which? Okay, this one here, this QSC, does those smaller monitors. And there's 2 of them on channel 1, 2 of them on channel 2. So that's how we can control those each pair independently. And then down here, this Samson monitor amp, each one of those JBL monitors, the bigger ones, are on 1 channel of this amp, but both channels of this amp are combined up here, so they come from 1 signal. And for lack of a better reason, for the reason why we only do 3 monitor sends, is you can see we're just out of returns. 2 of these on the top do the top speakers for the house. The other 2 do the bottom speakers, which are the ones you can actually see. In case you didn't know that, the ones that you can actually see down lower, there's another pair of just like them up behind the grills up high that do the balcony. And then we've got the blue and white, the orange and the green are 3 monitor sends. And then the last yellow one here is the subs. And they only take the 1 channel. And that's the bottom amp down there. I believe that's set up so that it only takes in 1 input, but that 1 input goes to both channels. So basically, I think I'm about done for tonight as far as setting up all that stuff. Anything else, kind of need to wait till the band gets here to figure out exactly where everything's going to go. Here's our little mic case where we keep the different microphones. Here's more SM58s. And these are kind of like a they're by a brand called Behringer. They're called a XM8500. They're basically their clone of an SM57. Not bad mics either, but they're a lot cheaper. So if we have somebody that knows going to beat up mics, we might use those instead sometimes. See what else we got in here. I think this one feels more like more SM57s. Yeah, I think we got like 3 more of these. Good mics to have. Let's see here. This feels like another SM58 maybe. Yeah, it's just another SM58. Same with this other bag, I think. Then we got some DI boxes, which I don't think we're going to have to use this time. Basically what these do is they take in a 1/4 inch signal, convert it to an XLR. Most of them will also let you do what's called a ground lift, which can help with getting rid of a 60 cycle hum. If you know anything about AC power or your wall power, it oscillates at 60 hertz, and sometimes you can get that fed into the house signal, especially because with these 1/4 inch jack, they're usually what's called unbalanced signal versus a XLR, which is balanced. And you can kind of get some issues there. We got a few different brands. Got some Whirlwind, DMS, Behringer. This one's a Rolls, I think. With these, you can just plug guitar straight into those. A lot of times, bass amps especially might have a direct output. You might run into one of those, that kind of thing. And this last mic here, I saved for last. Set you down for a second. It's kind of a little bit of a special mic. It's kind of made to look retro. It's not old by any means, but it's just made to look that way. It's still not a cheap mic. This is a Shure 55 SH. Recently we used it in our Buddy Holly show. If you were here for that, we had that on the lead singer mic or mic stand for that, since that kind of fit perfectly with that era. Those are kind of mics you saw in that era. So that's why we went with that mic there. We'll pull it out every now and then when it's appropriate. Now we're about as ready as we can be for right now for the show. So this video probably won't be up before then, obviously, but hopefully you'll be at this show and you'll be able to see them perform live on this stage. And we got a lot of other cool events coming up when it comes to bands. I know we got kind of a Women of Rock show coming up. There's a Fleetwood Mac cover, I think, coming up. A lot of cool other events coming up. I don't have a list in front of me, so I can't necessarily say a whole bunch. But we'll be happy to see you come out here and see one of these shows. And if you're interested in any of this tech stuff, feel free to get in touch with us and volunteer. It's definitely something that we're always looking for good volunteers. Tech stuff or otherwise, we need volunteers in concessions. We need volunteers just to help clean up. So no matter what your skills are, we can find something to do for you around here. And thanks for watching this video. Hope to see you soon.